Welcome back to the class, everyone. One of the most important things about progressing your roster in Galaxy of Heroes is understanding resource management and how to be as efficient as possible. So that's why today we're going to be taking a good look at all of those shipments. So I will label this before we get into everything as a very end game mindset. I've been playing the game for almost 6 years now. I have a 10 million roster, but I think this can be applicable for most rosters, probably between here and about 5 million, and even maybe lower than that, but we'll have to kind of get into the nitty and the gritty of each area. So this is what we're going to be doing. We're going to go through every single one of these shipment sections here and talking about what I buy, why I buy it, why it's important, and why I'm not really buying other things. So again, this is meant for particularly my roster, people are trying to build up to my roster, but also with two other things in mind. Number one, we're kind of going to be going from a free-to-play perspective in the sense that I really don't like to be buying lots of things with crystals. I realize there is a value spectrum within crystals about what's good to buy and what's not, but 90% of what I buy with crystals is refreshes, and then the rest goes into this fun little number here that I'm eventually saving up for if Jar Jar Binks ever comes to the game. So we refer to that as our Jar Jar fund. The other thing that I want to label this as is this is really meant for long term. This is not necessarily for you to get the character that you want today, but it's to get the 5 characters you want along this year. So that's really what we're going for. So as far as the featured shipments, the only thing that I really ever bother to buy here are everything you can get with credits, because I think all but one of them can be used for relic materials. And while, 2 or 6 isn't going to mean a lot right now, but you do this 4 different times a day, every single day, and that will start to add up. I will say I am a little, if you're not spending actual cash, that's fine if you're not, but if you're not actually spending actual cash in the game, I really don't like these shipment packs right here. You'd be much better off slow farming the character through the node, or even refreshing that node for the 25 crystals to be able to get the character. So like we saw those characters in there. If you go down to the hard node, you do your 5 attempts on zombie or whatever it is, and then there will be a 25 crystal option here. That is a much better value to be able to get the character than getting them in shipments if you are looking overall to accelerate it. And I don't think there is much else in here except for gear and stuff like that. And again, I think there's better places to get most of that. So that's pretty much where featured shipments ends. As far as the weekly shipment store goes, I don't really buy anything out of here. I think there is a little bit of a merit to the ability of Material Omega. If you're short on these, this is a nice way to catch up. And our Mark 1 raid currency is one of the more readily available resources that we're going to have, and the amount's even not that high. So that's probably definitely excusable. Do not buy Kairos with this. Oh my gosh, is this a bad deal? I realize that we're short on Kairos. Even I myself am right now, as you can see. This is not the place to get them. It's probably one of the last places to get them. The GL farming tickets, this is actually pretty cool. This can save you a lot of pain because you're not constantly having to avoid your farms. And then as well, again, this is kind of what we previously said as regards to shards. Cantina battles. This one is actually really stinking cool. Why this is important. When you come in here, assuming you have already farmed up every single character, and I really do advise doing that first, that way you don't get caught with your pants down. If there's something that comes out and you really want it, you already have the character shards at least done. I never buy these because you don't have to. Ship credits, I kind of get that argument if you are really into mods and you're not so trying to build up the gear in your roster. I personally don't do that, but there is a fair argument for it. What I do is I go and I buy the ship, because I don't know why they made it this way, but for whatever reason, ship shards are worth significantly more, not significantly more, they're worth a little bit more than the rest are. So for example, 400 currency here, 400 currency here. If we go and buy the ship, and then we go all the way down into our shard shop, it gets converted here to 190 shard shop currency that I can use to go and buy gear. And now if I go in here, and this isn't good, don't do this, but just for the sake of the argument, if we go in and buy Stormtrooper Han, who has 10 shards, but he's accelerated, it's actually going to be less than 190, it's 150. So while 40 shard shop currency might not be that much, when you start doing that through multiple shops over multiple days, it does add up, and you don't have to take that hit. So definitely, once everything is done, and this just becomes a shard shop currency type of deal for you, Cassian's U-Wing is the way to go, just because previously mentioned it's worth more. Or shipbuilding credits, that's also pretty good too if you're looking to build out your ships or continue working on mods. The guild activity, this one is where things honestly get a lot more complicated, and probably should have its own video alone for this because of how wide it is. So we have the Mark III holo projectors. That is the main thing that I am currently buying with my MK1 currency, because it gets changed into the heat sinks at a really stinking good value, which is a relic piece that I always have a tendency to need. So if we go in here and we look at it, you actually only for 20, you get the same price here. You get 5 Erodium heat sinks, for as if you were to try to do a whole stun gun, and it won't even let me do it because I have it locked. But even if we go in here and we unlock the stun gun and we try to do him, and I don't even think I can, oh, I can't craft one of these for the sake of the argument. If we go in here, it's also worth 5. So I can either burn 20 holo projectors, or I can burn 50 Carbantes and 50 stun guns all at once. I'm definitely going to go to the holo projector side, because this is just a much better deal, and I can get that with my MK1 currency. If you're not at the point where relics are the main bottleneck for every single thing you're doing, a lot of this other gear in here is pretty good value. I realize this is this wasn't the MK1 currency, this is the normal guild activity currency. What I typically been doing with that is actually buying these pieces right here. There's some that have really good overall relic value. Characters are probably also what you should be doing, especially with the MK1, all the way down at the very, very bottom. That's, again, for the same reason that we talked about in the cantina battles. You want to get your characters out of the way so that when the time does come to farm Lord Vader, the time does come to get Leviathan, or when the time does come to work on your crate raid teams, you already have the shards done and out of the way. Maybe not do all of them. You could probably split them in a fashion, because there actually are a ton in here, especially with the raid characters. Those would probably need to be priority number 1. But after that, you just kind of buy the gear that you need when you need it, just because you get such a high income of this, even if you're not really that far into the crate raid. In fact, even if you're just doing heroic Sith, you should have a huge supply, at least, of the MK1 currency. The MK2 currency is even simpler. You only really buy one type of thing with it, and that is the right side pieces, whether that is for relic material specifically, or it is because you were just trying to gear up characters past gear 12. So the MK12 armor tech data pad is a good example, as well as the HoloLens here. You can pretty much notice which ones you're supposed to buy because of the price. So it's a left side piece if it's more expensive. So we're always going to go ahead and go with these. I don't like particularly buying the furnaces here, because I'm really into the furnace node on fleet nodes. So if I buy them here, I end up double dipping way too much. So I'd much rather buy these guys down here. That way, when I do get my characters to gear 12, those pieces are already readily available. And my furnaces really just kind of take care of themselves because of the way we have our farming pattern set up. So do not buy these pieces, at least here. Terrible value. You can get them for much better at much better prices. And then MK3, I've been primarily using that right now on our Zimbittles as well as the impulse detectors. And this is why I made the kind of the free-to-play comment towards the very beginning. I realized the value for these by crystals is one of the best in the entire game. If you notice that you have a surplus of crystals for whatever reason, that is a good buy. I do not do it because I'm just very strapped for these. These are pretty much entirely refreshes / Jar Jar Fund. Whereas, yeah, you could get impulse detectors with crystals, but I like to get them here. Arrow magnifiers probably come from the same place. I do not buy Gerda pads here just because I really don't buy Gerda pads anywhere. R9 is essentially non-existent for my roster except for requirements, and those are very spare. Next up, let's go ahead and tackle Squad Arena. This will be a lot quicker. Through here, I've actually only been doing prestige, and the reason why is even though my account is 6 years old, I have lacked on buying prestige through this shop, so it's now become a must for me. As you guys know, Leviathan is coming out rather quickly, and if I don't have enough of this to max it out, I'm going to be in trouble. So 1910 is the magic number. If you're not in a position where you need the capital ship, again, go for the shards down here to turn to shard shop currency so you can get valuable gear. The gear down here at the very bottom, and this might be a blind spot for me for newer accounts. Some of this might be good value for something, but for my account, it just doesn't really do anything. I don't think it's really highly salvageable, and if I'd be much better off going after the gear that I need to be able to actually turn into relic salvage. And there aren't any ships in here, so we don't have to worry about that weird conversion rate. Credits are probably also excusable, although I think the MK1 has much better value when comparing things. So do what you need to do when you need to do it. That's not really that big of a point of contention. Guild or Galactic War tokens. This one, again, same exact thing as we approached on the Cantina battles. buy the ships every single time, assuming you have all of your character shards done. If they're done, you don't really need to worry about them, and you're just going pure for shard shop currency. Get all 3 of these. I don't care which ones they are. It does not matter. They just have a better rate, even at 4 versus 10 shards. That's probably pretty important. Mods. This really needs to be a part of an entire mod series that would be much more lengthy, but the only thing that I'm currently buying out of the store for mods is it actually has to meet a ton of criteria. The mod has to have speed on it. It has to be 4 or 5. The mod has to be gold. And on top of all that, I want one other stat or primary that also is just generally good. So that's asking a whole lot, I realize that. But that's why my credits never drop down to 0, because I'm just so picky that I eventually get there and my mods are fairly decent. So like I would not buy this mod just because defense as a primary stat is not good. It's very good as a set, but primary stat, it is terrible just if you compare it how it works out. So I would not buy that one. There was this one's 4 speed. Actually, this is a pretty good candidate to be bought. So it is gold. It does have speed at least 4 or 5, and also has crit chance on a crit chance set. That's pretty good, and especially because the primary has to be offense for the squares. So there's not like another mythical mod out there that also has offense as a secondary, unless you're one of those guys who played 7 years ago when mods first came out. So yeah, this is actually a pretty good buy. I'm gonna go ahead and pick that one up. No idea what it'll turn into, but there it is. And then up top, this is actually this one's okay. So we have a defense primary here, 5 speed. It does have a health secondary, and the reason why I like at least 2 good secondaries is because when we take a mod all the way up for our ideal scenario, all the way up to 6A or whatever it is, you're going to be hitting 2 stats. So I don't like just going when it has speed and then a bunch of other stats that don't really make a difference. Yeah, I'm actually going to buy this one too. I realized I said I had pretty strict criteria, but we just bought 2 mods there. So they do occasionally fall in here. Next up, Fleet Store. This one, Zetas. We've been coming out with a lot of videos surrounding Zetas recently, and the reason why is just because they still are in such a high need. I realize that if you skip pretty much all the luxury ones, you don't really have that big of an issue, but some of the luxury ones are nice, and there's some niche scenarios where they can be really helpful, and that just kind of beats out any other value. I mean, really, obviously you want to get the characters unlocked before you go to Zetas, especially key ones like Darth Vader and General Grievous. Those 2 are really the highest priority, and then it probably goes to a lot of the key ships, and then to Zetas. But Zetas are where I'm currently at, as I already have every other thing in here unlocked, which is super great for me, but it's not the case for every single player. So Zetas last, get your characters in first, but this shouldn't be a shard shop farm, and I also wouldn't advise it for ability materials for Omegas. Get those with the MK1 currency if you're really hurting for them. Guild Event Store, this is another one where we could probably do an entire series alone on it. The way that I am doing this is a bit different than most. I think most accounts it's wise to actually be buying Chirotech with the Get 3 currency just because it's a pretty good deal between the conversion rate. I don't do that. I am far enough into the game. I have enough characters already at Gear 13 that that's not really a need, although I say that with only 40 in stock, so that's kind of fun. So I'm actually consistently buying the micro attenuators just because that's the only real way to speed them up without spending cash, so that's my main use for them. My Get 2, however, is entirely Chirotech, and I do specifically like to buy the computer Chirotechs out of here, not because they're a better deal, the deal's the same, but because the shock prods have a better deal when it comes to farming the node, because they include a very important material that is used for bronzium wiring, which for some endgame accounts ends up being a bottleneck and ends up being very important. So I'd much rather farm this node, get as many of my shock prods as I can, and then when it comes to using Get 2 currency, or as we'll see here in a second, Grand Arena currency, I would rather be getting the other ones. So coming back in here to our Get stuff here, we get our Kairos through here, but I don't do the shock prods, I do the other ones, the value's the same. Characters are probably a priority. I'm not sure if I would actually vouch for them over the other store that we have here where you're able to get them a lot faster, although I think there probably is still some merit actually from getting them here as well, just because the conversion rate for cost benefit and guild activity, believe it or not, is actually worse. Like, you can get more, what I'm saying is you can get more of the other gear for MK1 in comparison to the characters than you would if you were to say get them through guild events. So you get them, to summarize, you get them faster through guild activity, but you're getting a better deal if you do them through guild events. But at the same time, don't take 6 months to shard farm gas. Like just get gas. Like that's, you will get more rewards in other game modes, whether it be through conquest or through GAC or whatever it is, by having him sooner. That is one that I would not delay for the sake of efficiency, because that character can make a real difference in your roster. So can Malik or Hoda or Wump or whatever. So going back to our actual get currency, this is one that I don't really have everything lined up super well with. I typically come in here and I always buy these pieces right here. These are the left side pieces for our gear 13. And the reason why is because they always get scrapped to relic materials for myself. And I always try to keep them actually pretty low, because I craft them into the full pieces, because you don't necessarily get better value that way, but you're allowed to use more of the piece overall. So those definitely get bought. The gear or the MK12 armor tech as well, this type of stuff, anything that can be turned into that relic salvage is beneficial to me. I don't really bother with the carbs here. I get enough of those through the guild activity store as it is. Grand Arena currency is essentially pure Kyro for me. That's all I buy. And it goes down really quickly. And in fact, I only buy one of the Kyros. I only ever buy the computer Kyrotech salvage here, just because, for reasons already mentioned in regards to when we talked about it for guild events. Charge up currency. Charge up currency also has, I'm very strict on this, and this one I feel strongly about. Always these three pieces right here, the ones that are half the price of the right side pieces. So, little trip down memory lane when we were talking about how to spend your MK2 currency for the raid stuff. You always hear you buy the right side pieces. This is very important, because they are cheaper than the left side. This is flipped when you go down to shard shop currency. It is now the exact opposite. The left side pieces are now cheaper. In fact, they're half the price that the right side ones are. These ones I don't buy because I don't believe you can actually turn these into relic materials. So actually, take back a little boy, I said don't buy those. At least I don't think they can be, or either that or missing their piece a lot. But this one right here, this can be turned into relic salvage, and that's very important again for my roster. 720s. Don't do this stuff. I mean, the MK5 droid collar is okay if you really need them, but don't do these up here that are all at the 720 price, regardless of what's there. If it's 720, don't buy it. Conquest, I don't buy anything out of here because it all goes to whatever character is out there, or maybe some signal data, so the store is really relevant for me. And then the Datacron store, this probably is relevant for most players, but I get the cash just because I'm constantly low on it. And then whatever I need, I typically don't need a lot of this. The MK1, I need a little bit. Really what I need the most of is the MK2, and CG did a fantastic job of specifically excluding that from shard shop currency. Don't buy anything with ally points, by the way. Like nothing ever. Don't do it. Unless you don't have hot utils and you don't ever want to take the time to open them manually. Anywhere you see them in game, they are bad value compared to what you would get if you're trying to open up. In fact, the whole reason, I don't even know if this is a tinfoil hat moment. The whole reason they're here is so that you don't go and open the bronziums with them and get a much better deal. That's why there's not a sim button here either. Like, I know a lot of people have like millions built up. The reason there isn't a sim button here because the amount of shard shop currency and full carbonis and credits and stuff that you would get from this is way better than CG wants you to get from a value perspective. They would much rather, instead of you take your 100,000 and get all those resources we just mentioned, they would much rather you just come in here and blow it all on reinforcement materials that are, complete garbage, or 10 of these that are, again, these ratios are terrible. Don't ever buy anything with those. But yeah, that is going to make up the majority of this video. Let me know what you think. Let me know also, for those of you who are at completely different parts of the game and have kind of studied the economics of these shipments, let me know what you think and what could be helpful out there for other players. But until the next time, stay awesome.